This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya, from the Photo School of Government. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at some of the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 19th of March 2021, and I am 2M.
I am CS.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, Magufuli, the legacy. In the Standard, tragic tale of Magufuli. And in the Star, Magufuli's last prayer. Absolutely. But I know 2M, you're going to take us on that.
Straight away. And I'll begin by saying the following. RUTO is totally overrated. And they just concluded Machakos by-election. Couldn't define it better. I mean, how do you lose by a margin of over 90,000 votes? Such a margin is tantamount to a vote of no confidence. However, RUTO shouldn't really worry about Machakos. What he should worry about is what happens after Machakos. RUTO should ask himself if the Jubilee party is set to remove him, as Jubilee deputy party leader next week on Tuesday. What will it mean? In our view, RUTO's deputy presidency is tethered by the constitution, but underwritten by the party.
Brilliant.
And if the underwriter withdraws their guarantee, then his position in the constitution becomes tenuous. But that's not it. Should we go into a parliamentary system and RUTO is out of Jubilee, he won't appear anywhere in government. He won't be deputy prime minister. Not if, but when Jubilee and all NASA parties form a government of national unity, or a coalition government, RUTO will be out of the picture. And where do you think he will be thereafter? For as long as he's not in government, we don't really care.
Oof.
Yeah, I like what you said, and especially about Jubilee party politics, and because I've also been thinking about party politics quite a bit.
Yeah.
In fact, Maria Suluhu's ascension to the helm of power and the intrigues that surrounded her installment made me think a lot about CCM. Tanzania's Chama cha Mapinduzi is the longest serving ruling party in Africa, having held power since independence in 1961. It was born from a marriage between TANU and Zanzibar's Afro-Shirazi party. CCM's dominance has roots in Tanzania's post-colonial nation building. Mwalimu Julius Nyerere believed African political parties formed in response to colonial occupation, as opposed to internal issues, were fundamentally different than those in the West. He saw one-party systems representing the aspirations of an entire nation as more democratic than multi-party systems, which he argued were prone to factionalism, in contrast to traditional African forms of governance, which value consensus over competition. This anxiety about factionalism, which Mwalimu Nyerere had, was shared by other founding fathers. Across the pond, President George Washington argued against multi-party politics and warned about it in his farewell address when he was leaving office. He said, "Let me now warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party generally. It serves always to distract public councils and enfeeble the public administration. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms. It kindles the animosity of one part against another." That said, most countries on the continent are unlikely to revert to one-party systems, and multi-party democracies do have multiple advantages. In fact, multi-party politics accelerated the opening up of our democratic space in Kenya, and that has had positive consequences on our nation's development and prosperity. Be that as it may, the fears that were expressed by founding fathers like Mwalimu Nyerere were valid, and the risks of factionalism and the potential for protracted divisiveness still remain. So how is this tension between the very real risks and the tangible benefits to be resolved? Strong political parties governed by national laws and regulations that ensure party discipline. In this way, the risk of factionalism can be turned on its head so that the party is instead used as a vehicle for facilitating consensus, especially in countries such as ours, where we enjoy a diversity of multiple nations as well as healthy pluralism of ideology and beliefs. In such an environment, you need consensus-building mechanisms, and well-organized parties can be used to realize this. And by this, I don't simply mean building consensus within the party, but building consensus across representative parties. They become avenues for dialogue and means by which we can increasingly become one nation under God. In this way, we begin to see the political genius of Uhuru Kenyatta. His consensus building has borne multiple fruits in terms of development, legislation, and policy, both internally and internationally. From this lens, we can also therefore see that the handshake is not just about two men, as some would have you believe, but it is about the consensus they have secured across their parties, and consequently, this has us enjoying unprecedented peacetime dividends. And because of this success, we're also seeing more political parties being co-opted into this coalition of the willing. If strong, disciplined political parties can help foster dialogue and facilitate progress, you cannot therefore have that very real potential for progress held at ransom by people who would use their party not for dialogue, but as a platform for aggravating the rest of us with their greed. In order to move forward, parties must increasingly be seen as national institutions, and anything or anyone that puts that progress and well-being of the nation at risk must be ejected. For the avoidance of doubt, let me be clear. William Ruto must be ejected from the Jubilee Party, and this should serve as a precursor to his ejection from government.
Wow. Wow. The recent events of Magufuli's death got me thinking, will the system that Magufuli set up survive? Magufuli had a hard-nosed, confrontational, tit-for-tat sort of approach to governing. And after he took office in 2015, he imposed measures to cut costs. He downsized delegations traveling abroad. He diverted funds meant for dinners or public celebrations to support the needy and the sick. He also cut his own salary from 1.5 million to 400,000 and halved the cabinet to 15 ministers, compared to Kikwete's 30. Under Magufuli, the IMF listed Tanzania among the fastest growing sub-Saharan economies. Magufuli has built various infrastructure such as the Bagamoyo port, planned oil pipeline from Uganda, SGR. He's done a capital injection into Air Tanzania. His first major surprise as president, we're told, was when he cancelled a lavish independence rally and instead said that the money set aside for celebrations should be channeled to hospitals. On that day, he led the country in a massive cleanup of Dar es Salaam. The lesson, I think, for President Suluhu is that Africans do not seek to be romanced.
Yes.
They seek effective leadership.
Yes.
Leaders do not wait for public consensus. Leaders build public consensus via example. And I think that's what CS was talking about. More so, President Suluhu should do all the bad things at once and the good things only very slowly. And she can borrow a page from her predecessor, Magufuli. He got in with over 80% endorsement and after he was elected, and he began to seriously consolidate his grip on power, crushing opponents like locusts while at the same time endearing himself to the masses.
Right.
So in the book, The Prince, Machiavelli teaches us that everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are.
Yes.
And he goes on to tell us that the lion cannot protect himself from traps and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. Yes. President Suluhu must channel her inner fox and her inner lion.
Yes.
And so even though Suluhu appears to be a little bit inexperienced in politics, i.e. she has a very young political background, the next few years will be crucial as CCM's political dynasty is really in her care. And a strong, firm hand can fundamentally transform not only the party, but also the economy of Tanzania. And she has the opportunity to oversee Tanzania's transition at this critical time. I hope she chooses to be a growth-favoring dictator. And importantly, I hope she nurtures her sense of self, who she is in her own eyes, not as seen through the eyes of others.
Beautiful.
Very well
So
said.
we had 3 headlines, guys, and they're all Magufuli related, and I really think I'll be a dictator and choose the Daily Nation.
I was going to go with it. It didn't have to be a dictator.
It was nice to say.
You have won the support of the masses.
I was endearing. So there you have it.
Magufuli.
There you have it. Daily Nation gives us our winning headline.
And now, our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled Radical Uncertainty, Decision-Making for a Knowable Future by John Kay and Marvin King.
Nice. Can I give a summary?
Please.
So this week we had an economics sort of breakdown week. On Tuesday, we looked at the book Narrative Economics, How Stories Go Viral and Drive Major Economic Events by Robert J. Schiller. In the book, the author asks us, can we afford to ignore the power of how viral stories affect our economies? The author offers a new way to think about this and argues that by studying popular stories that affect individual and collective decision-making behavior, these stories have the potential to improve our ability to predict, prepare for, and lessen the damage of recessions, depressions, and other major economic events. He calls this understanding narrative economics. On Wednesday, we looked at the book Austerity, When It Works and When It Doesn't, by Alberto Alesina, Carlo Favero, and Francesco Giavazzi.
Yes.
The book seeks to give a broad perspective on austerity and examines the cost of austerity in terms of lost output. The author defines austerity as a policy of sizable reduction of government deficits and stabilization of government debt achieved by means of spending cuts or tax increases or both. The authors believe that if governments would follow sound fiscal policies, austerity will almost never be necessary. And on Thursday, we reviewed the book, Good Economics for Hard Times, Better Answers to Our Biggest Problems by Banerjee and Duflo. And the book reflects on how to deal with today's critical economic problems. In the book, the authors argue that the resources to deal with these problems are there, but what we lack are the ideas that will help us reconcile our polarized stances on these issues. And today we delve into uncertainty.
Yes.
Yeah, so the book Radical Uncertainty was authored by John Kay, an LSE professor and a policy advisor, and Marvin King, who served as governor of the Bank of England for 10 years, including at the time of the global financial crisis. The book is basically a lengthy reflection on probability theory or utility theory, which uses a lot of anecdotes to demonstrate how useless probability theory can be in most real-life situations. For example, they highlight former US President Barack Obama's decision on whether to launch the attack to kill Osama bin Laden, who may or may not have been in the compound in Abbottabad. But the fact is, Osama was there, and I doubt Obama had a gut feeling he was in some random compound on the outskirts of Pakistan. But I suppose the point was, either the target was there or he was not. And no amount of estimation could resolve that, but a choice had to be made. To govern is to choose and not to hide behind claims of not being sufficiently briefed. So they distinguish risk from uncertainty and proceed to argue that risk models are inappropriate for most of life's uncertainties. And effectively, can be arrogant to suppose that we can know all possible future states of things, their payoffs, and probabilities of occurrences. What probabilistic analysis does instead, usually where good decision making matters most, is that at best it can give a false sense of precision. The alternative to probability models seems to be a roughly experienced judgment informed by credible and consistent narratives in a collaborative process. They say little about how those exercising such judgment would be held to account. But my major takeaway from the book is that we shouldn't be overly reliant nor give the final word to formal risk models and probabilistic reasoning. Ultimately, a model is just a model and can never be a substitute for wisdom.
I like that.
Fantastic. What I like most is how to make a good narrative. So what makes a good narrative? It's a story. Now he says the quality of presentation of a story makes the most immediate impression. So he uses the case of a murder trial of O.J. Simpson, who was accused of murdering a lady called Nicole Brown Simpson and her lover, Ron Goldman. Johnny Cochran, O.J. Simpson lawyer, was able to win an acquittal for his client by making the mid-90s trial about race, not a double murder. To do so, he manipulated the mainly black jury and the media by placing the Simpson case within a larger narrative sustained hostility between the Los Angeles Police Department and the African American community. From the very beginning, from when he was first hired, Johnny Cochran knew that he wanted to win the case. If he wanted to win the case, he would have to go off script rather than focusing on providing a reasonable doubt related to the evidence. Although this did come up later in the trial, he accurately predicted that his best shot at winning the case would be to give the jury and the audience a story. But more importantly, one of his most effective methods was theater. So his strategy was to dramatically pose a question to the audience that showed them a disconnection in what they know and understand, and then prove his point so that they can fill the gap in their own minds. Probably the biggest example of this, at least in Johnny Cochran's closing argument, is his ever famous quote, "If it does not fit, you must acquit." During the case, the prosecution had asked O.J. Simpson to try on a bloody glove found at the crime scene. However, the glove did not fit. Whether this was because the glove was truly small or because Simpson spread his fingers out so the glove truly wouldn't fit will be something we'll probably never know. But the fact remains that during the trial, the glove did not fit the hand of O.J. Simpson. Johnny Cochran knew that this was going to be his biggest point against the prosecution, so he pointed it out multiple times during his closing argument. He repeatedly uttered the phrase to make sure the disconnection in the jury's minds between the prosecution's claims and what they saw in court was filled with his proof of reasonable doubt. He ensured that the jury knew that they couldn't convict someone without sufficient evidence, and he made this statement over and over again to show the jury that there was in fact insufficient evidence to convict O.J. Simpson. The statement he made was also made to rhyme and also had rhyme and rhythm to it, which further helped it get stuck in people's minds to this day. Bottom line, O.J. was acquitted of double murder, thanks to a good story
and some drama.
I
love it. So this was an interesting book. I like that the one of the authors is from LSE, my alumni.
Yeah, but do you say?
But do I say? So I looked at the chapter that was talking about narratives, just as you did too. And they use narratives in an interesting way as tools for thought. And so they're trying to say, how can we make better decisions under conditions of radical uncertainty? And so Kay and King argue that narratives have a really important role to play in this. And so he says that they can help in our decision-making process. And what a narrative does is moving what is abstract to what is to something more concrete. And so you use metaphors, analogies, linguistic tools, such as the rhyming that you were talking about, to better understand and make sense of a situation.
Correct.
And so it helps us answer the question of what is going on here. And so we need narratives to help make sense of the facts.
Absolutely.
Especially when there's math, data, and those quantitative things that people don't like so much.
Yeah.
But then they go on to caution us and say it is dangerous to think that one narrative can be applied universally, and that narratives must undergo continual revision.
Absolutely.
Now, people often want an overarching grand narrative that they can apply to any complex situation. And what comes to mind? Hustler, Dynasty, those kinds of narratives, right? But narratives are often quite complex, and they're not stationary. They're not, they're always in a state of flux because they're responding to different things.
Right.
Narratives also mean more than just stories, right? So they include other tools, such as fictional agents that act. They give you, so you're able to give hypothetical conditions to say, to explain something very complex.
Right.
And they say for a narrative to resonate effectively, it must be both credible and coherent. This means that it must be presented in a fashion that is trustworthy and believable. Is your Hustler Nation narrative trustworthy and believable? And it must be consistent internally as well as with external information and reference narratives. So what you're seeing and what you're being told, are they connecting? And then also remember this, it does not follow that a narrative has to be true. A fictional narrative can convey reference, information that can help people navigate that kind of risk and uncertainty.
Right.
Lastly, we should, when it comes to narratives, you should not just look at them as whether they're true or false. Look and understand and see, is it useful or not? I think that's the most important thing I took away from it. And the hallmark, they say, of scientific thinking is not adherence to these sort of deductive reasoning methods so much, but instead an openness to new information, which led me to another quote from one of my favorite authors by Adam Grant, who says, "Our convictions can lock us into prisons of our own making. A hallmark of wisdom is knowing when it's time to abandon some of your most treasured tools and some of the most cherished parts of your identity." So the solution here is to accelerate your ability to rethink. So rethink a lot this weekend. Have a lovely one. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Prime Free to Air, and Star Times. And our winning headline was the Daily Nation.
God bless.